From the moment I was born, I was second place in a race I never entered. My brother, Mark, had already won. He was the golden boy, the pride of my parents, the one who got the good looks, the athletic body, the loud voice, the confidence. And I was the quiet one. The one who read books instead of playing football, who preferred to draw instead of wrestle, who cried too easily and laughed too softly. I remember my 5th birthday. I had asked for a dinosaur cake and a drawing set. Instead, Mark got a new soccer ball on my birthday and everyone gathered in the yard to watch him show off his tricks. My cake was vanilla, not chocolate like I'd asked, and no one even noticed when I slipped away to sit under the tree alone. That was the pattern. It didn't matter if it was my birthday, my school event, or just a regular day. Mark had a way of turning the spotlight toward himself. And my parents let him. No, worse, they encouraged him. Jacob, why don't you be more like your brother? Mark's out there making friends and playing hard, you're inside wasting time with those silly books. We didn't raise a weakling. Toughen up. I was 8 when I realized I was never going to be what they wanted. My father didn't come to my art exhibition, but he made sure to attend every one of Mark's soccer games, even the ones I begged him to skip so he could see my work. I began hiding my drawings under my mattress. Praise was something I had to steal in quiet moments, like when my teacher complimented my painting or when the librarian said I read more books than any other kid in school. But at home, I was invisible unless I made a mistake. Then I became the family joke. Mark was especially good at making me feel smaller than I already did. He mocked the way I spoke, imitated my posture at the dinner table, and once told the entire family that I still slept with a nightlight. I was 10. Don't be so sensitive, my mother said when I cried. He's just teasing. You have to learn to take a joke. I wasn't weak. I was just tired. Tired of fighting for a space to exist. And still, I kept hoping anyone would see me. If home was hard, school was brutal. Mark made sure of that. Being 2 years older and socially dominant, he had built himself a following. By the time I entered middle school, the hallways were his kingdom. And I was the sacrificial lamb. He never hit me where teachers could see, but the torment was constant. He tripped me in hallways, flicked my ears when I passed, and once stuck a "kick me" sign on my back during assembly. I didn't know until someone finally did. My classmates laughed. Teachers shrugged it off. After all, Mark was charming. Teachers adored him. He played sports, smiled in yearbook photos, and volunteered just enough to seem like a model student. I was the weird kid. The one who ate lunch alone in the library. The one whose backpack was sometimes mysteriously emptied onto the floor. I remember sitting in the bathroom stall during lunch more times than I can count, trying to convince myself I didn't need anyone. That I could be enough for myself. But some days, I couldn't. The worst part wasn't even the bullying. It was what happened the day I finally stood up for myself. I was 12. Mark had cornered me in the hallway with his friends, mocking me in front of a group of girls. I snapped. I told him to shut up, called him a coward, and shoved him. He wasn't expecting it. He slipped and fell. Just that once, the world saw him fall. I was sent to the principal's office. Mark played the victim so well, his tears looked real. He said I had anger issues. That I lashed out often. That I was a threat to myself and others. My parents didn't even ask my side. "We're ashamed of you," my father said that night. "Mark's always been patient with you. And this is how you repay him." I looked at my mother, hoping for a sliver of compassion. "We didn't raise a violent son. You need to control yourself, Jacob." That night, I cried harder than I ever had. Not because of what they said, but because I started to believe it. Was I the problem? Was I really weak? It took someone outside that house to answer that question. When my parents finally washed their hands of me, they sent me to live with my grandmother, my father's mother. She was supposed to straighten me out, as my dad put it, but it turned out to be the beginning of my salvation. I was 13 when I moved into her small but cozy house. It smelled of baked bread, lavender oil, and old books. There were plants everywhere, and her kitchen window had chimes that sang gently in the breeze. She greeted me with a hug I hadn't felt in years, warm, firm, and safe. I didn't speak much those first few weeks. I was so used to being quiet that words felt foreign on my tongue. But she didn't push. She just let me be. Let me settle into silence, offering hot cocoa at night and waiting patiently while I stared at my homework. It wasn't long before I noticed the difference. She noticed me. "You're not weak, Jacob," she told me one night while we sat watching the stars from her porch. "You're sensitive. And thoughtful. That's not a flaw. It's a strength the world doesn't recognize fast enough." No one had ever said something like that to me. She enrolled me in a new school, a fresh start. I was terrified. But for the first time, I wasn't alone. She drove me to school each morning with music playing softly and a packed lunch in my bag. And when I came home, she asked about my day. Not in passing. She sat and listened. At school, I met real friends. Not many. Just a few. But they saw me, too. Kids who liked books, coding, drawing, kids like me. I started to smile more. I stopped hating mirrors. Grandma encouraged my art. She framed my drawings and hung them up like they were museum pieces. I began entering small competitions. She sat in the front row, clapping the loudest when I won. She helped me apply for summer programs, bought me books I thought were too expensive, and never once used the word weak. She taught me how to cook. How to write a check. How to plant herbs. She taught me that strength wasn't in how loud your voice was but in how true you were to yourself. "You're going to do great things, Jacob," she said once while stroking my hair. "And when that day comes, don't let anyone shame you into forgetting how hard you worked for it." I think she knew what was coming before I did. Grandma passed away a week after my high school graduation. Peacefully, in her sleep, holding the necklace I had given her for Mother's Day. My world shattered again, but this time I didn't fall apart. She left me everything. The house, her savings, and a letter. "You were my joy. My quiet, powerful joy. I gave you a safe space to grow, but what you've built is your own doing. Keep building. And never, ever let them take it from you." I took her advice to heart. I got into a good university on a scholarship. I majored in business with a minor in digital design. College wasn't easy, money was tight, and I worked nights doing freelance illustrations, but I was determined. Every exam I passed, every small client I secured, every late night coding a website, it was a brick in the foundation of the life I was determined to build. By the time I was 25, I had launched my own digital agency, starting small. Designing websites and branding for local shops. Then I expanded. I hired a small team. My name began showing up in online articles. I wasn't rich, but I was stable. Proud. Free. I bought a new house. Not a mansion. Just a warm place with big windows, plants, and wind chimes. Grandma would have loved it. And I visited her grave every month, updating her like she could still hear me. We landed a big contract last week. I finally got a dog, his name's Hugo. I think I'm doing okay, Grandma. I really think I am. For the first time in my life, I felt strong. But peace, as I would learn, is a fragile thing. One phone call shattered it all. It was my mother. "Jacob. We need your help. Your brother. He's not doing well." I stared at my phone for a long time after the call ended. My mother's voice still rang in my ears, laced with desperation I didn't recognize. "He's drinking too much. He lost his job. He's He's staying with us, Jacob. But we're old, and the bills. She paused, then said the words I knew were coming. We thought maybe you could help. Just until he's back on his feet. 15 years. 15 years of silence. They hadn't called to check in when I graduated. Not when I started my business. Not even when Grandma died. And now. Suddenly, they remembered I existed. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just hung up and sat there, the past clawing its way back into my calm, quiet life. I hadn't thought about Mark in years, not really. Occasionally, I'd see an old photo, or a classmate would mention him online. But in my mind, he was a closed chapter. A bully I had outgrown. A shadow I no longer walked under. But now he was back. And he was sinking. I did my own digging. Found out he'd been fired from 2 jobs. That he had 2 DUIs. That he had burned bridges with friends and couldn't hold down work. My parents were living off their pension, struggling to cover his bills, and trying to make it seem like this was all a temporary bump in the road. But I knew better. I remembered the way he treated weakness. He called it pathetic. Unworthy. And now that he had become what he once mocked, they wanted me to save him. My father called the next day. He's your brother, Jacob. You don't turn your back on family. I nearly laughed. Family? I wanted to ask him where that loyalty was when I needed it. Instead, I said, you turned your back on me a long time ago. That was different, he snapped. You were fragile. Sensitive. We were trying to toughen you up. You broke me, I said. My voice was calm, but my hands trembled. And then left Grandma to pick up the pieces. Silence. Just think about it, he said finally, his voice smaller now. Please. The manipulation came slowly at first. A message here. A voicemail there. My mother sent old photos of us as kids, me in a crumpled birthday hat, Mark standing behind me with a forced smile. He's still your brother, her text read. He needs you now. Then came the guilt. We're old, Jacob. We raised you. We're your parents, whether you like it or not. Would your grandmother want you to turn your back on your own blood? They invoked her name a lot. That was their favorite weapon. But Grandma never asked me to sacrifice myself. She never asked me to carry other people's consequences. She gave me wings, not chains. Still, I visited them once. I needed to see it with my own eyes. Their house was dim and tired. My father looked older, hunched in a way I hadn't remembered. My mother clung to the past with framed photos and a plastic-covered couch. And then there was Mark on the recliner, half asleep, unshaven, eyes sunken, a beer can next to his hand even though it was just afternoon. Jacob, he said like nothing had ever happened. Like we were still boys, and I hadn't spent my childhood dodging his punches and jabs. Look at you. Mr. Big Shot. All grown up now, huh? I didn't respond. I just looked at him. Really looked. This wasn't the brother I feared. This was a man who had spent his life believing he could treat others like garbage and still expect someone to clean up after him. My parents danced around me during the visit. Praising my success, asking if I could help just a little pay off the mortgage, cover Mark's rehab, maybe even offer him a job at my company. He just needs a second chance, my mother pleaded. Don't you remember what it was like when you struggled? Yes. I remembered. But they didn't. They weren't there. They weren't there when I cried over Grandma's grave, wondering if I could make it. They didn't remember because they weren't a part of that story. I left that house with the weight of 3 lifetimes on my shoulders, but I also carried something else. Resolve. They had tried to break me. And they were trying again. But I wasn't the same boy anymore. I wasn't weak. A week passed after that visit, and I didn't call back. They tried again: emails, texts, even a letter handwritten by my mother. She wrote in delicate cursive, the kind people use when trying to sound sincere. "We know we made mistakes. But families heal. Mark was young. So were we. Please, Jacob. We need you. No apology. Just rewrites of the past." As if mistakes could cover a childhood filled with fear, humiliation, and emotional exile. They didn't want forgiveness. They wanted funding. I sat in my office one evening, staring at my grandmother's photo on the wall. I remembered what she said before I left for university: "They'll come back when they see your light. But not everyone who returns deserves to stand in your glow." She was right. I didn't owe them anything. Not after the way they discarded me. Not after the years they stood by while Mark bruised my arms and broke my spirit. Not after they called me weak. I decided to speak plainly one final time. I called my parents and asked for a meeting. Not at their house. Not at mine. Neutral ground, a quiet cafe, midweek. I arrived in a tailored navy suit, looking like every success they had once said I was too soft to ever achieve. They were already seated. My father had a forced smile, my mother looked hopeful. Mark didn't come. Maybe he thought this would go differently. I didn't touch the coffee they ordered for me. I leaned forward and spoke clearly. "I'm not here to help Mark. I'm here to make something very clear." My father's smile faded. My mother blinked, confused. "I am not the weak son anymore. I am not your last resort. You made your choice when you threw me away. Now you have to live with it." "Jacob," my mother started, but I raised a hand. "You call it a mistake. But you knew what you were doing. You watched Mark hurt me. You sided with him. You told me to toughen up. You only changed your minds when I became useful." Silence. My father looked away. My mother swallowed hard, eyes shimmering. "We didn't realize," she whispered. "That's the thing," I replied. "You never wanted to realize. Because realizing would mean accepting blame. And you've never been good at that." I stood up. "You want me to help? I'll give you the number of a financial advisor. But don't ever ask for my money. And don't ever use Grandma's name again. She gave me everything you couldn't." They didn't follow me when I walked away. Maybe they finally saw it. I wasn't Jacob the weak anymore. I was Jacob, the man who survived them. I thought walking away from them would be the end of it. But people like them, people who never faced consequences, don't stop at silence. Not when they smell money. Especially not when that money was something they believed they deserved. It started with a letter. From a lawyer. A formal notice that my parents were requesting a review of the estate of Eleanor Grayson, my grandmother. The woman who raised me when they discarded me. The woman who left me everything: her home, her savings, her land, her shares in the family trust. At first, I couldn't believe it. But there it was, in black and white. They weren't asking for help anymore. They were demanding their rightful share of Grandma's inheritance. They claimed she was manipulated. That she wasn't in her right mind when she made me the sole heir. That she had been influenced by resentment toward them. That I, the estranged son, had isolated her. I stared at the words, stunned but not hurt. Not this time. Because this was who they truly were. They didn't come back because they loved me. They didn't come back because they regretted how they raised me. They came back for the money. The lawyer I had used for the inheritance, Mr. Kinley, a patient, precise man in his 60s, called me immediately. "This kind of thing happens more often than you think," he said. "But in this case, you're safe. Eleanor's will is solid. Multiple witnesses, clear instructions, medical records confirming her mental state. They won't win, Jacob. They're just trying to rattle you." "Rattle me? No. Not anymore. I sent my response through my attorney. Clean, calm, unshakable. I attached emails and letters they had sent after the will was read, letters where they acknowledged my inheritance and asked me to help them. Their own words proved they knew exactly what Grandma wanted. It wasn't about justice for them. It was about entitlement. They believed they deserved something from the woman they abandoned. The woman they left to raise the child they deemed unworthy. The legal battle was short. Their lawyer backed down after the evidence was shown. But it didn't stop them from calling me furious, accusing. How could you let us suffer while you sit on all that money? My father barked. That house was meant to stay in the family, my mother hissed. How dare you keep it all to yourself? Mark even called. You think you're better than me now? You think just 'cause Grandma left you some money, you're special? I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I said, she left me more than money. She left me peace. Which is something you'll never understand. And I ended the call. That night, I sat alone on the porch of Grandma's house, the house they thought they could steal from me, and watched the stars. I remembered sitting here as a scared child, her hand wrapped around mine, whispering that one day, I'd be free. She was right. They could try to take everything from me. But they would never have what mattered. Not her love. Not my peace. Not my strength. Not me.